Welcome to Future Customer Value, where global thought leaders share their career-defining moments. Welcome to episode 25 of Future Customer Value. This is the 25th episode. We've been doing this for more than 6 months now, and it's pretty exciting to be at this stage. And to honor that, I wanted to bring on a very exciting and special guest, my co-founder, Nigel Hammond, who we've been on this journey together starting Foresight the past 3 years, and I'm excited to actually talk about it live on the show. So Nigel, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Great to be here, Sagar. I'm honored.
Well, we got a lot to dive in here, and we want to start for you who is listening to talk about why Foresight? Why are we on this journey? Why have we spent the past more than 3 years through this crazy market trying to build a platform, a philosophy to measure and realize customer value? It's so important, and I thought it'd be really interesting to take both of us down memory lane to talk about those experiences. So I'll kick off here with an intro on Nigel, how we met each other, and it's very relevant to the storyline. So Nigel and I, we started working together at a company back in 2016 called DealCloud. This is a Series A fintech company that was competing with Salesforce as a CRM platform selling into the financial services space. Private equity funds, investment banks were our core customers. I was in the post-sales side running implementations. I was one of the only people doing that at the time. We were 2 million in ARR. And Nigel was on the sales side running the outbound and a lot of inbound SDR, BDR motion. So that's where we both started. This podcast is brought to you by Foresight, a full-service value realization platform designed to help you unlock growth in every single account. For more information on Foresight, please email them at info@gainforesight.co. That is info@gainforesight.co, and they'll be in touch. Nigel, I'd love to have you talk to us about what was that world like? Like, what was that early stages of crazy scale tech company world like, and what impact did that have on you?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, it didn't feel like crazy scale at the time in the early days. But it was really interesting, and winding the clock back a little further than that, I kind of just stumbled into the tech world. I had moved to New York, and after spending a year post-college traveling around and deciding it was time to get a real job, and showed up to New York where I had only been once before as a visitor. But my now wife, was from there, and I joined a sports team upon arrival, which was my and still is first way to start to make friends in a new place. And I needed a job because I was broke after traveling for a year. And I met a guy who said, "Hey, my company's hiring." And I was like, "Great, what do they do?" And he described something that I didn't really understand at the time, but I was like, "Well, if they're hiring, like I need work, so I'll take a shot." So I interviewed, and it was for a sales job, an outbound sales job at a business called Yext, which has since gone public. And they, the job itself was god awful. It was like boiler room style sales. I was there with 50 other people, and we were, making 200 dials a day, and they had these scoreboards in the room that tracked everybody's calls made, deals closed, and talk time. And it reset every day. So you just had these leaderboards, this like such in your face, how's everybody doing? And you were only as good as, the day that you were on. And so anyways, in that environment, there were things that I really hated, and that was like the pressure of this like insane chaos of exactly what you would see in a movie, and from like a small town kid in New York, I was like, oh yeah, New York's just like the movies. But there were also things that I really enjoyed about it, and what I really enjoyed about it was just getting exposure to this like whole industry that I really hadn't spent time thinking about, and recognized that what an awesome career path that it could be. And specifically for that, we had these managers of the team, and these managers of the team were like my age or maybe a year older than me. But I was like, wow, you have awesome jobs, and you're like in a great place for being in your mid 20s here. And, basically what you did is you got into this company at the right time in the right place and then rose with the tide and were a good performer, but like had that kind of opportunity. And so I was like, I want that. And I want to be able to do what they're doing and not be the grunt on the phone that's like fearing for his job every month because they were firing 10% of the staff. So anyways, I went to, start exploring and figuring out like what other earlier stage businesses could you get into that would allow you to be one of those people to rise with the tide. And combining that with, what I was appreciating is like just a methodical way to go about and approach sales, ended up at DealCloud. And so in joining there, I entered with a lot of perspective and thoughts about like, okay, this is how you sell and navigate a call and do all these things. And the company that I was at previously taught like a really dialed in great sales process. But obviously we're entering into a business that had 13 people at the time. And it was like I showed up on day one and was given the training onboarding guide from the last company that my manager had worked for. And he's like, well, we don't have one here yet, but it's basically the same thing. And that was so different than like the very structured, regimented onboarding that I had just come from in the old world. But what I fell in love with in those early days of startup life was just being in an environment where it's like there's an endless amount of things that need to get done. If you will throw your hand up and attack something with gusto and with an eagerness to like solve a problem and take something on, then there was limitless opportunity. And the fortunate part that I had nothing to do with, but just happened to be in the right place at the right time, was that business was on the cusp of going through this crazy journey of scale. They had a product that was so needed in the market. The timing was absolutely perfect as all these private equity funds were coming around to the fact that like they had to get off spreadsheets and had to implement a purpose-built piece of technology. And the other piece of like fortunate timing in there is coming in at an early stage, and everybody was reinventing these processes and figuring out what is the scalable way in which we're going to grow this business. And it was all seasoned veterans who were at the helm and running the show over there, who knew how to implement these scalable processes. And so had the great fortune to be able to learn from people who had been there and done that, of like building the foundations of scale and setting a business up at those early days to be able to accelerate through the days that were to come. So that's my monologue that answers some of those questions. But yeah.
As you were moving to New York and you joined the sports team, it felt like that the way you're describing Yext and that boiler room style sales hall sports team, right? You got the scoreboard, you got the scorecard up there, and everybody's gone in to put points on the board. I was visually seeing that, and that was my first job out of college too, was on the operations side, but we had a big sales team and we're doing that. It's funny, we both came from highly operational sales, large sales, outbound effort. But then moved into
great
software.
Environment.
Yeah, it's a great learning environment, right? It's
not a great one to stay in, but yeah.
You talk to a lot of people and you figure out what actually generates why people want to buy something and what that hook is.
Man, for sure. And there's a lot to appreciate about an organization that's just like so dialed in. And I think a lot of people realize it's not what they want, but it is a thing of beauty in many ways. And
yeah. And it's also funny. A lot of people in this industry and folks that I've spoken with have stumbled in, right? That's the term you use, stumbled into software and the tech world, a pretty niche one at that, right? This is not a platform that everybody knows about. This is a CRM platform for a very dense, like unique slice of the financial services market, which is private equity partners who are trying to increase their deal flow. And for me, like I had come from a large sales organization, a company called Red Ventures, and I cold emailed a bunch of companies. I was sick of that culture, similar to you. And DealCloud was, I searched up, I was in Charlotte at the time. It's like, hey, I'm really interested in startups. And in Charlotte, I searched up what are the best startups to work for in Charlotte? And I found this blog post, and the 7th link down on Google, I clicked on it. I was just perusing through, it was like all these random companies, and I saw this crazy orange and green lightning bolt logo. I was like, what is this? And it was DealCloud. I was like, oh, we're a financial services software. I was like, cool, that sounds good. Click. And I submitted my resume to the support line. Got an email back within 20 minutes. from a guy I used to play tennis with back in high school. It's a Charlotte-based company, so Charlotte-based people. I had an interview the next day. It was crazy, but I had no idea what financial services was. I had no idea what the heck a CRM was. Private equity was like, what was that, like stock market? Like I had no idea about that. It's like all
Yeah.
these random like things that all came together, and we were both thrown into that. So
Yeah.
it was such an edifying experience for me going into that world. But so let's come back to you. When you took that job and you were going through the onboarding and you were in that deal cloud world, like what was that? What was the experience like for you engaging with these large enterprise customers, right? Because very different than Yext Data, which is small businesses, and you're calling them up about getting listed on,
Yeah.
it's like these are multi-billion-dollar funds that you're talking to managing partners to try to get them to buy a big, expensive piece of technology. So what was that experience like for you engaging with these types of folks?
Yeah, it was it was great. And again, just really nice to be able to have people who were so knowledgeable doing it. And um, it's easy to be an effective sponge when you have like good water to absorb. And the people around were just like veterans who knew how to do this. And I was paying very close attention to exactly what they were doing and trying to replicate. But I think aside from that, what was really, really fortunate is they had hired the sales consultant to come on. And so I think the whole point is like, yeah, I was selling to plumbers beforehand, like calling plumbers in between jobs, trying to get them to give me their credit card in 10 minutes so that I could get their business listed and fix the wrong phone number that they had changed last year or whatever. And obviously a giant shift going to like the managing partners of these funds. And I think there's a big element of like fake it till you make it with that, which
Right.
I have no problem, putting on a confident face and just steaming ahead. But I think another piece to that is just like the methodology of how that goes about, because this wasn't like 10-minute trickery of like trying to get a one-call close and get somebody's, to fork over their card. This was having to go through like a more methodical process of establishing and building a business case around value. And so this sales consultant came in, and he's an absolute legend, Steve Tafaro. Still know him, Sagar knows him. And he came in, and so I look back and I was like, okay, I was this green, young, hungry sales rep who wanted to do things in a good way and just like generally like process, et cetera. And then he came in with this process of like how to run enterprise sales and specifically how to, execute a value-based sales motion. And so that was, to me, just made all the sense in the world. And, for him to paraphrase it, he's like, look, all that matters is value. And value is there's a way these businesses are doing something today. There's a way that they could be doing it with your offering. And the gap between there is all you need to learn about in the sales process and all you need to focus your efforts on talking about and telling them how much better life will be if you can close it. And so I really love that. And I think what it meant is like you had to make it all about the prospect's business. It wasn't about your offering. It was about like, hey, how are you doing this thing? And how much of a pain in the ass is that? Because we can make it way better by doing it this way. And so that was something I really latched onto. And it was, his whole methodology was talking about like a systematic way to go about identifying that gap in the sales process. And so I think that was in combination with the fake it till you make it and watching the people who knew how to sell to this audience, kind of the two necessary inputs. Is for me, it was like you needed a way to go about approaching that, along with just like the confidence, whether justified or not, to like go and look somebody in the eye and tell them that you think you can help them run their business better.
I gotta add in a quick anecdote here, because same boat, right? Fake it till you make it. And
Yeah.
I clearly remember, because I was on the post sales side, so we'd have one of the directors close a deal, and you're probably generating the leads for the directors at the time, right? Like getting qualified folks on the call so somebody could get some paper signed. But after the paper got signed, we needed to take them off of spreadsheets or take them off of Salesforce. And here I was, a young 20-something with no idea how a database worked and no idea what a primary key was, right, in Salesforce, which is really important actually when you're migrating data. And I get these people on a call, and there's some really rough personalities. And this one guy, I won't name names, but a very memorable call where he was this divorced, like passed over for partner twice in his life, guy in his late and mid 40s who was banking on this Deal Cloud project to take him to the promised land and to become a partner. So he was pretty wired up like this whole time. I get
Gosh.
onto this call and this is my 3rd month on the job. There's no onboarding. I'm still learning. It's like, hey, really excited to implement you. And he starts cursing like right from the beginning. He's like, what is this? Like, do you know what you're talking about? Like, what's your background? Have you worked at an investment bank before? I'm like, I'm not, I got a lot of software experience the past couple years, but like I had no idea what I was talking about. But anyway, it was pretty clear that this guy had a very clear vision for what he wanted to accomplish, but I had no idea what was in his mind. And I highly doubt the salespeople knew as well, because we wanted to close a deal, right? And
Yeah.
and it's nice to be able to measure that gap, as you mentioned, but that's not just a sales thing. It's an ongoing thing. It needs to be part of the implementation process, part of the onboarding process, the post sales process. And so this guy was really anxious and wanted to have this whole vision for how to map the entire deal management workflow and the dashboards that need to be in place and how to map to his process. And I found myself being a therapist basically for most of the implementation, listening to this guy spew a lot of expletives, but also like some pretty good ideas through that journey. And I was also a sponge, absorbing. Man, it's a really good idea. Taking notes. That was a 6-month long onboarding. It should have been 2 months, but because of his personality and how ridiculous of a guy he was, it took a long time. It took the whole company to come on board and support with us at some point. But it was fascinating because he had all these gaps, and he saw how Deal Cloud could complete those gaps. And it was part of our job in implementation to keep identifying those gaps, closing them for him, and then showing him how he could generate the value that he had in his mind and his heart, immediately, and move on to the next thing. And it wasn't a quick flip of, all right, you bought the thing, let's turn it on for you. No, like there's a lot of configuration involved, a lot of implementation, a lot of change management workflows, and he was spearheading this internally. So it was a great learning experience for me to map to how he, as a buyer, thought about the value he wanted to get and what was required to enable the solution to actually impact his workflows. Very huge moment in my own learning. And it's cool because I think when you're selling an enterprise large ACV deal, it's like 50K deal right at the time. That's what it requires, both in the sales side and the post sales side. So I'm curious, talk to us about a moment in your when you were in that seat, and it could have been another time of the Deal Cloud journey too. But when you had this reckoning, like, my goodness, where like we are as a company and where the customer needs us to be is just, there's a massive gap, right? In how we need to serve the customer. What was a moment like that for you?
Yeah. So, first off, I love the story. The intensity of that
Yeah.
old crowd
By
was,
the way, this guy made it to
not,
partner. I flew to Chicago 3
let's
times
go.
to serve this guy, and like 6 a.m. flights, working my butt off all night. Eventually, he did make it to partner. So, and he owes
There
me
you
a
go.
ride on his new yacht
I hope he
still.
sent
So
you a bottle of whiskey or something for that.
still waiting
You're
on that,
still
but
waiting on,
I'm
still
holding
waiting
my
on it.
card. When moment demands it, he is
Yeah.
going to give me what I need.
Well, when Foresight is, making it to the big time and preparing to go public or something, maybe we can offer him to get some early access or something. Yeah, okay. So a moment where that, really came to fruition. Yeah. So for that, I'll fast forward because as many, I think, people who end up in post sales tell a similar story. After doing the sales thing for a while, I was really intrigued with what happened on the other side. And, we had gotten a good sized customer base by then, a lot of deals that I had helped generate, get over the line, et cetera, were now, live customers. And I kind of heard the call to see what it's like on the other side of the fence. And, I think from a personality perspective, that really just boiled down to, I was a lot more interested in delivering the dream than, trying to sell it. I found myself getting, just kind of bored, I guess, for lack of a better term, with doing the same sales pitch and just trying to go through the same motion all the time. And I loved the technology that we sold. I was really interested in, like, eager to get hands on it and everything. And so, it was really appealing to go and join the post sales org. And so at that point, that was account management. There was AMCS, but we'll spare or I'll spare us on diving deep into that. But basically joined the account management group, and that then culminated in moving to London to open the London office, once there was enough customers over there. And so, that was so much fun and such a fulfilling, rewarding, challenging experience. And for the first time, for the first times in months, it was just me running around trying to take care of the customers. And so, it was all FaceTime with people. It was either flying around to visit, offices, or it was running around central London, meeting with all these funds and trying to like make them get value out of our solution. And so in doing that, right, I eventually started to hire on some people as well, and try to bring on new folks to help take care of the ever-growing customer base. And so there's two sides to this that I'll tell. But the first was, it was an entirely manually driven effort, right? It's like going about and doing that. The strategy was to get in front of the people who mattered in one of those funds, talk to them, get them to trust you, first of all, by regurgitating all the things you heard the last people say that validated that you knew something about their business, et cetera. And once you got some credibility established, get them to explain and help talk with you about how their business is solving these certain challenges, and attempting to approach these workflows, or like things that they needed to get done. And so it was a ton of like in-depth discovery, but it was all like wandering around in the forest, lost, and like trying to figure out and carve your own pathways through that. And when we think about the strategy, right, it's like we try to go to customers and do a business review to get them excited about what was coming with our product, make sure they were feeling good about what was going on with our solution and how they were using it, et cetera. And so in one of those meetings, we put together a deck, a standard QBR deck that's like pretty bad, has the usage metrics that we could pull, when their renewal date was, some key product updates that we thought they'd care about, et cetera. But I spent a lot of time putting these things together to try to make it look pretty, to try to make sure the usage stats were right, and tried to pull in other things that were compelling. So I was meeting with one of these big customers, and this was our biggest European customer at the time. And I was meeting with these people, and we were in their big fancy boardroom looking out at the Thames River, and there's this big impressive space, and I'm there like presenting this and talking about things, and they stopped me right in the middle of it. This was an hour-long meeting, and there were like 3 partners in the room, and then 2 of the directors, and they just said, "Nigel, we don't care about this. This isn't what we care about. All we care about are best practices and what we can do to get more value out of your solution, because it's really expensive." And so, I heard that and was kind of like shocked, number one, because I was like mid-flow and thinking things were going really well. And then this guy's like, "I don't give a crap about what you're saying." And, in the moment made up some generic deflection about best practices and what that meant, whatever. But in leaving that meeting and in walking, back to my office, I thought a lot about that. And the thought was like, wow, like that guy's got a real point. Best practices are the only thing that matters, right? We have this unique position of working with thousands of other funds that look like his fund. So we should be the experts of knowing exactly what he can do to squeeze as much value out of this. But like, I'm just a person on an island here, giving the best advice that makes sense to me. Now, that best advice is like informed by the hundreds of other conversations I've had with people in his shoes. But like, my understanding of best practices was so limited by the limitations of memory and individual, right? And it seemed insane that as a wildly successful tech business at this point, we did not have any infrastructure or mechanisms to be able to answer that question and enter that meeting with a clear understanding of what that business cared about, where there were gaps, and what the best practices were going to be to close those gaps. And, that was, to finish that off, amplified even more as I was trying to onboard new hires, right? Train them on what all these customers cared about. And it's like, I remember sitting there with a new hire and going through the list of customers that they were going to cover and trying to explain all these different nuances, and then realizing that like they didn't even know about the workflow that I was describing, that this person did differently than the other fund. And it was like, whoa, there is so much education that needs to happen.
Oh my
and
goodness.
It's just like up to me to teach this person, which was so inefficient.
And it's so, from the internal perspective, as you mentioned, there might be some folks who have that knowledge, but it's not connected across everybody. So
Yeah.
the answer is sitting in someone's mind. It's not easily accessible. it creates a poor customer experience for all the customers. And I remember when I had moved from implementation into solutions engineering. So I was running all the pre-sales demos and working with our account executives to help close deals. And because I'd done implementation, I had a couple really strong perspectives on a few of the use cases. And so when I moved to pre-sales, people knew that. And so I remember, to give an anecdote of the internal version of what you said, is it would be Sunday night. We use Slack, right? And there's big demos that were happening Monday and Tuesday, which I knew were happening. I felt good about them. I'd done plenty of these, but I was getting Slacks up until 11 p.m. on Sunday night from multiple reps. Who are like, hey, this fund based out of North America, they're in New York. They got a 200 million under management. They're really trying to improve their IR, their investor relations functionality. Like, what are the use cases we should be positioning to them? How should I start this meeting, right? What should I be talking about? And I would tell them all this, but it's like, why didn't we know that? Why did we not know what that customer, that prospect actually cared about earlier on, and have it be standardized? Because great, I feel awesome that I'm able to help you and have a better conversation. But what about the 99 other customers, the 99% of
Yeah.
other deals that are actively happening where we're not having this conversation? Someone's going in cold, giving a blanket presentation about some random functionality that the other side may not really care about. And then the deal's lost, right? That's a waste of time for the buyer, and that is a massive waste of investment for the company and the sales process. And so big gaps between the actual needs of the buyer, the prospect, and what the understanding of the company is to be able to deliver to that is ridiculous. And it happens all the time in so many companies. And that is, to bring it back to the theme of this episode, that is the fundamental reason that Foresight exists, right? We need a way to solve this problem. And I'd love for you to comment on that, and if you want to share anything else. But this massive gap, this information asymmetry between what the needs are and how the solution is able to address it, that cannot be a question mark. That has to be memorialized, and that has to be so obvious in order for value to be realized and ultimately for revenue to exchange hands.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's astonishing and like kind of nauseating to think about the waste that has gone into just like not having this insight, right? It's like, think about all the bad demos people have both delivered and had to sit through. Think about all the repeated questions people have had to answer because that information wasn't passed along in the handoff from sales to post sales. I mean, it's just astounding how much how much waste and inefficiencies have taken place because of that. And I mean, it's like, it's so interesting too, because it's nobody's ill-intended here. It's like everybody wants to give the best demo.
Right.
Everybody wants to, attend the best demo and like learn as much as they can about it. But I don't know, it's like the system without some structure in place just perpetuates like mediocrity. And it's like nobody wins in that environment. And it's not because of people not caring or anything. It's just because they don't have the tools to do it. Yeah, it's crazy.
For sure.
Crazy.
Well, we are going to wrap up part 1 here, and in part 2, we will dive into Foresight today and why and how all the learnings from our past lives have now manifested in what we're doing, and why we think that's so critical for today's market. So, Nigel, thanks so much, man. Excited to keep this going.
Likewise, Sagar. Talk soon.
Once again, thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you by Foresight. If you're interested in learning more, please email them at info@gainforesight.co. That is info@gainforesight.co. Thank you.